So let's move on to some of the other reaction, because as I said, even though we don't only want to focus on the negative, on the people who go purely to politics, we have to understand it, right? Like, this is the give the devil his due thing. See what the people who really are wrong, who use everything for their own purposes, see what they're saying. Because if you really see it and you understand where they're coming from, then maybe you can respond to it properly. So there were, we could have spent literally 10 hours today. I could have spent 24 hours today just reading you horrific tweets and Facebook posts and Instagram messages from politicians and blue check people. The worst sort of responses saying that Republicans have blood on their hands. Just the most vile, that, certain politicians are murderers. Just the worst sort of stuff. We could have done that, but we're only going to select a few here. Here is squad member, progressive and Marxist communist socialist Ilhan Omar from Minneapolis, Minnesota, who destroyed that city and state, by the way. She's responding to a tweet. Here's a guy by the name of Perry Stein, and it's a quote: "Two Uvalde police officers and a school resource officer fired at the shooter, but it did not stop him from entering the building." And then he links to a Washington Post article. The point being that there were some officers there and they were not able to stop this. There's some questions as to whether they did everything they could do, et cetera, et cetera. Connor, can we throw up her tweet again so I can get to that? She retweeted it and responded, "Honestly, every Republican who said this is how you stop mass shootings need to be voted out of office. Their pro-gun agenda is dangerous and it's time for sensible gun reform laws in American. Enough." Okay, so first off, this thing about sensible gun law reforms. Okay, it means nothing. What they usually say is common sense gun law reforms. Common sense. We have background checks, right? We have checks on people's mental health. You cannot create a perfect system. You cannot do it. There are always going to be people who slip through the cracks. There's always going to be someone who buys a gun legally and then someone who's able to get that gun that maybe lives in their house and finds the key or whatever it might be. There are also a crazy amount of illegal guns in cities like Chicago that are murdering people every single weekend. Find out if most of those guns or that are killing people in Chicago are legally bought or illegally bought. They're usually illegally bought, which goes to show you that no matter how many laws you have, bad people will get bad things. Pull up her tweet, sorry, one more time on the tweet. So their pro-gun agenda is dangerous and time for sensible gun reform laws in America. The pro-gun agenda is an interesting way of putting this thing. What she should be saying is the pro-Second Amendment, that you have the right to defend yourself. And perhaps if this school had other policies, if this town had other policies, Texas has pretty good gun policies, but perhaps everyone watching this, wherever your kids go to school, whatever synagogue you go to or church you go to or community group that you go to, if they thought about things a little bit differently. Why is it that there are armed guards outside of Barack Obama's house? Why are there armed guards outside of the U.S. Capitol building? Why are there armed guards virtually everywhere where politicians exist, right? We can find money for that, but we can't find money to put armed guards or a local community member who is armed. It doesn't have to be some outsourced thing. It could maybe it's a father, a retired police officer in the community, et cetera, that could guard these schools and do better defense of these schools rather than taking away people's God-given rights, which is really what the push will now be. The push obviously now by the left is going to be Republicans. Of course, they're racists and Nazis, but they're also murderers, and we should take their guns away. And thank God we have the Second Amendment, and thank God we have the First Amendment, which is defended by the Second Amendment, so we can say what we think and we can still defend ourselves. And then if there are little marginal places to talk about what we can do around some of the gun laws, and by the way, I bought a gun in California. It was incredibly hard and took an extremely long time. Is it easier to buy a gun in Texas? Yes, it is. And perhaps should we look at some of the ancillary things around that? Perhaps we should. But that's not really what this is about.